Hey everybody, Chuck here. In this video, in preparation for CTSC certification exams, going to be just looking at my notes here, research models, frameworks, benchmarking tools. So we're going to look at some of the frameworks or models that are out there that you and I can use to guide us in improving. And like before, I'm doing this to prepare for my teaching. I find that I learn best when I speak it out loud here, forces me to think through what I'd say to you. So this tends to be an opinion piece, and we don't use ASCM materials or the PowerPoints on the screen at all. So it's strictly a conversation between us here. So let me start out by taking you through a number of the different models we've got here, which is what we want to accomplish. So one of them I have on my notes here, as I look over here, is the balanced scorecard. So if you look at the official term, it's a list of financial and operational measurements used to evaluate organizational or supply chain performance. Now, the four areas tend to be from a customer perspective, business process, financial, and learning and development. And so the creators of the model were, my interpretation seemed to be, hey, one measurement can't do it all. So if we're going to have an accurate representation of our company, it's got to be a balanced approach. In other words, we got to look across multiple areas. And these are the four that the authors did from their research to say these are the four that we have to have. Makes sense because it's impossible to imagine that one measurement can tell the whole health of the business. Question I have in my mind is, hey, I'm going to take these four into the exam, certainly, but as part of a bigger question, is there a better combination of four? Or maybe it's three, or maybe it's five, but what are the best measurements for the company that you and I are working with? The SCORE DS model is the second one. And so we've talked about that it looks at the four pillars of performance, process, practices, and people, and is saying, here's the standards in each area that we recommend based on experience and history and feedback from others in a very non-judgmental way, balanced way. These are the standards that we need to work towards and achieve. So we can use it for process improvement, benchmarking, best practice analysis, and use it to help us improve in the process. Third one is Global Reporting Initiative, and I probably missed it in the notes. I'm bringing it up on my other screen here, but GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, is often mentioned within the CPIM exam as well as CSCP in the sustainability section and here as well as the setter standards. So what I ended up doing is jumping out to the internet real quick, and let me read what not that they're the end all be all, but I want to cite, sources. I went to Wikipedia for the quickest description, and here's what it says. I'll read this from my second screen up above here. The Global Reporting Initiative, known as GRI, is an international independent standards organization that helps businesses, governments, other organizations understand and communicate their impact on issues such as climate change, human rights, and corruption. Those standards are called the G4 standards at their very core and base, but they build upon them they have different GRI sets of standards for different industries like plastics or metals or other things that way. So it's an excellent standard to be looking at. The next one that we mentioned in the material is the ASC Enterprise Standards for Sustainability. Now, when you look in the section this is tied to in the exam content manual, it doesn't mention it at all there, but you see it in other spots where it's mentioned, but not in a lot of depth. And so I went out to the website, and again, it was the ASCM website. It's publicly posted standards out there. It's about 95 pages. And let me read what it says for that. A framework that organizations can use to evaluate their supply chains, assess their alignment to the three pillars of the enterprise standards, sustainability, ethical, economic, and ecological in our case. They serve as the criteria by which an organization can be measured when pursuing a certification. We can use it to update supply chain strategy, help identify gaps for continuous improvement, and a tool to evaluate supplier quality, development, or selections. Standards in this document, many are based upon processes and metrics found from the SCORE model, a framework intended for organizations to optimize supply chain performance. So we're taking the SCORE model, extending it out to the enterprise, and ASCM has a standard certification process for the enterprise. And then they have a derivative work where it's applied to, or appears to be applied towards, the sustainability side of things. The next standard that's out there that we talk about as a framework is the ISO standards, and many of us are familiar with those from ISO 9000. But what we have out there for 9,000 we're used to, 14,000 for sustainability, 26,000 for social accountability. But ISO, the International Organization for Standardization, internationally recognized broad set of standards. Certification voluntary, and if obtained, must be renewed every 3 years to retain or remain valid. The idea behind it, of course, is like many standards, these are the things we need to do, but at the same time, not talking much about how it's going to be done. That's up to the company. Okay. Another framework that's out there is the ASCM digital capability models. I went out to the website again for that one. Helps companies assess current capabilities and plan for the future, in which digitization leads to supply chains that are resilient against threats and disruptions. And so it's looking at 6 areas where we have to have technology capability to be connected to each other and to stand up to risk and be resilient. And those areas are connected customers, product development, synchronized planning, intelligent supply, smart operations, dynamic fulfillment. So these are the 6 areas where we have to look at processes, metrics, practices, as well as technology here. The last one, or the next one I saw out there, was from APQC, from supply chain planning and benchmarking out there. So that one also had to go out to the internet for. We didn't have much out there. And so what we've got out there is the following areas out there. So let me read what I have for you from my notes. Little blip there for a second. I apologize. We had a little hiccup in the internet here. So we were talking about the American Productivity Quality Center and their benchmarking that they have out there. And they, interesting enough, when you go out there to their capabilities maturity model, they've really got it under wraps as far as access to content. But what it looks to be, which I think is safe to take into the test, is the idea of, if you're going to improve your process, assess the maturity, their model says these are the 7 areas, and these are the levels you have to be considered mature. We also have Lean out there, which many of us are familiar with as a framework, which tries to minimize resource use. So as you look through it, we talk about the house of quality in our material, or the house of Toyota, and that really becomes a model and a picture. I would say that if we can wrap our head around all the elements that make up the house of Toyota, then we're ready for the test on that. Excuse me for a second. Okay, we're back again. I swallowed funny there. My goodness, I apologize. Another model out there, looking at the notes out here, Six Sigma. Six Sigma is a framework for improving by reducing the variation from part to part, process to process. So getting in, understanding the process, how it operates, changing those elements that are causing variation to improve the variation. Excuse me. Theory of constraints is another framework that sits out there. So it has as a baseline, any system has at least one element that limits its maximum output. And so this constraint determines the maximum output. And so if we can improve at the bottleneck, we improve at the whole system. So there's two things that we capture in the material is the 5-step process where we try to identify the constraint. We say exploit the constraint, but really as the second step, maximize the output at the constraint. And then thirdly, subordinate everything else to the constraint, because why would we want to produce more at a non-bottleneck? Because no more is getting out the door than the bottleneck. And then break the bottleneck or elevate the constraint, and then repeat the cycle at the next bottleneck. The other one also, as a framework, it's more of a probably scheduling to some extent, is their drum buffer rope technique as a way to schedule and set the pace at the constraint. TQM, total quality management, long-term success through customer satisfaction. So everything's geared towards what the voice of the customer is and building products and processes and manufacture accordingly without losing the voice of the customer. That can be a framework for improvement. Agile operations can be a framework. That comes out of TQM, the ability to respond quickly to unpredictable changes in customers. Again, if we're able to move around and adjust to the changing customer demands, then we're going to have a pretty effective supply chain and business. And a framework for transformation, more so than a framework for supply chain, although it could be for the engineer to order environment, is project management skills. So using those skills and knowledge that are part of Project Management Institute and their project management professional certification, how do we coordinate organizing, planning, scheduling, directing, controlling, monitoring, evaluating activities when there's limited time and limited resources. So for an engineer to order type situation, that would be an ideal approach to consider as we're looking at things. For many of us, of course, we would use project management to help us lead us through that whole transformation of our supply chain. So a whole bunch of little small pieces put together there, and apologize for the scratchy voice and the loss of voice for a second there. It's I guess that's part of getting going in the morning and something we all bump into here. So hopefully this helps us.